eyes wide open.
Deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, something ancient lingers. Whispers in the fog, footsteps on empty trails, and shadows that don't belong. Haunted mysteries buried in Appalachia's past and still haunting its present. Don't forget to subscribe, and let's take a look.
In the night, close the curtains and the woods don't whistle. Broom by the door, Hanks count every bristle. If you're walking and you hear your name, walk faster, don't run. If you run, you'll pray.
I used to live in the Appalachian Mountains, and yes, I have some scary stories to tell. I was living in a small college town in the Great Smoky Mountains. My roommate was a local who introduced me to all of her area friends and favorite hiking spots. It was like living with a tour guide. She and her friends knew the flora and fauna of the mountains well. I never felt afraid when I was out in nature with them. One day, 4 of us decided we wanted to see the sunrise from one of the mountain lookouts. We set out at 4:30 a.m. when it was still dark, a new moon darkness. We rode up the mountain in my friend's beat-up Subaru, seeing only what was directly in front of our headlights. Gray foxes, coyotes, deer, the usual. When we reached the top, we parked and started chatting to pass the time. We were talking about our favorite classes, the best house parties, nothing spooky. But suddenly, everything changed. We all instinctively went still, quiet. As we did, we realized there were no nature sounds outside the car. The woods were completely silent. We had the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Worse, the feeling of being hunted. We were prey. It was too dark to see anything clearly outside our windows, but we knew something was there. Something big. 5 feet away in the tree line on the passenger side. I was behind the driver, so I didn't get a good look. My roommate spoke up calmly but sternly. We need to go. And without saying a word, the driver started the car and headed back down the mountain. As a born and raised city girl, completely confused by what just happened, I asked, "Was that a bear?" in a light-hearted way, hoping they'd say yes and we'd be on our way. But they looked at each other and then at me. One of our friends spoke up and said, "No, I've been hunting my whole life. I've seen a lot of bears. That was no bear. I don't know what that was." That was the last we ever spoke about it, and we never went to those woods in the dark again.
For me, it's always trying to get me to open an exterior door. My back door is all glass and it points out toward super dark woods. And one night when my husband wasn't home, my kids were asleep, I heard what sounded like him right on the other side of the glass calling my name. That's why the rule's there. Don't acknowledge it. Don't open the door.
My most memorable scary moment was, so I live in my childhood home now, and we live right beside my mama and papa, and there's literally just like a hill that separates us. And every single night I would go visit my mama and papa, and I'm terrified of the dark. Still to this day, I'm terrified of the dark. So I would run every single night when it was dark up back and forth to mama's. One particular night, I remember feeling something and seeing it from my peripheral vision, something big and black. And I just kept going because I thought, oh my gosh, well, I'm just so scared. It's literally just in my head. Just keep going. I remember feeling the wind from it on my face. And I just got up to mama's and just didn't really think about it. I just went on with life because I thought maybe it was in my head because I was already so scared. And then a few days later, after I'd done forgot about it and everything, my dad had either my papa or my uncle, because they both live right beside me, I can't remember which one, asked my dad what friend I had running with me up to my mama and papa's that night. Yeah, I was about 10. That one stuck with me, and I still don't like to go outside these doors at night by myself. Nope.
A couple of nights ago, my daughter was taking a walk in the driveway like she does frequently at night. And then all of a sudden I heard her say, "Oh," and then she booked it back inside. And as she came in the door, I met her at the door, asked her what was up. She said there was something in the neighbor's field, this field here, right across this little road of ours. And she wasn't sure what it was. So I went ahead and came out here. We've had a lot of coyotes around here lately, and if it was a little pack of yotes, I wanted them to move along, please. So I came out here to yell at them. That's usually enough to get them to scatter. I get to about right here. I have a headlamp on, and I can see green and yellow eyes, about 3 or 4 sets of them right here. Okay. Low to the ground. So I'm thinking definitely coyotes, right? So I get right here and, I said, all right, go and get. And the things that were here, low to the ground, all of a sudden popped up to about right here. So they stood up a good maybe 6 feet. And then they looked at me for a minute and then dropped back down right at the ground and started kind of skittering toward me. Now, thankfully, these little creepy things didn't cross the road. They kind of got to the ditch there and they stopped and just watched me. So I was like, you know what? My bad. I'm in your backyard. I'm sorry. I'll see my way out. And I just backed back up all the way to the front door and I took my butt back in the house. Now, something to keep in mind is that I frequently walk at night in these woods by myself without a light or anything. So I don't normally think anything about walking at night. Neither does my kid. Until a couple of days ago. So this is your friendly neighborhood reminder that the Appalachian Mountains are older than bones and they've got a lot of creepy things that still remember when these mountains were new.
No, it's not creepy at all that my little boy just went out the back door outside while I'm sitting here in my room. And he's out there in less than 1 minute and comes running back in, giggling, saying, "Mommy, what do you want?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "You were hollering for me. You were saying my name and you were saying something else. What were you talking about? What do you want?" And I'm like, "I was sitting right here in my room, buddy. I don't feel too good."
So this story comes from my dad. It's one that has been told around the campfire for years. This would have taken place way up in the mountains, way back in a holler, sometime, I'd say, in the 60s, the late 60s maybe early 70s. And when I say in a holler, I'm talking pinto beans and cornbread on a dirt road back in a holler. There are no towns close by. The only thing you had to rely on was your kinfolk or maybe your closest neighbors. There's no police you can call if anything goes down, you know. So they, one night, went to what would have been my great-great-grandma's house. And all of the cousins, my dad, my mama, my uncle, they're going over there to have supper, spend the night, and Dad said that all the cousins and he would get like a feather bed and put it in the floor and sit by the stove and let, you know, my great-great-grandma tell them spooky stories. So that's what they're doing. It's about midnight, and all of a sudden, something kicks the door in, and I do say something because it was not a person. Something kicked the door or hit the door so hard that it did not just rip the door off the hinges, it broke the door in half. Like ice cream sandwich broke that in half, and it was like a heavy wooden door. Now, I don't know what in the hell is strong enough to break a door like that in half, but that is what happened. You can imagine how terrified they all were. Now, my little mama, God rest her soul, she couldn't have been 115, 120 pounds soaking wet, and she is a fiery little redhead, and nothing was gonna mess with her babies. So she got her 12 gauge pew pew and just boom, 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 standing right there in the house out the, well, where the door used to be, the door frame, because they thought that some maniac was snooping around and trying to break in on them. And my Uncle Floyd is out there looking around, trying to figure out, you know, is there anybody out here? There was nobody. There was nobody, and they didn't have anywhere to go. So they had to spend the night with no door. And I'm sure that was absolutely terrifying. Now, they were still not convinced that maybe it wasn't a person after that first night. So my Uncle Floyd obviously, stood guard for the next few nights looking to see if they could catch anybody snooping around or coming back to the property. Nobody did. Nothing ever turned up, and I guess we'll never know what it was.
So this story takes place at my childhood home, which is on my parents' extremely, I wish I could talk, extremely haunted farm. So this has not happened to me since I've moved out of that house. So my mom was always kind of weird about, like, when my dad goes to bed, he went to bed at around 7:30, I needed to go in my room too. I didn't have to go to bed, but I needed to be in there. And we never had curtains on, like, the dining room, like, window, the kitchen window, and the laundry room window. They really never had curtains. They were just always open. I don't know why she never put curtains on there, but she didn't. So one day I asked her, I'm just like, hey, like, why don't you like me being in here at night? And she always told me not to look out the windows. I think that's more of like a grown up in the Appalachian Mountains. Like, if you live here, you shouldn't really look outside at night. But she was like, well, I see stuff out there at night and I don't want you to see it. Immediately I was like, tell me more. So she's like, okay, well, we'll just stay up tonight and I'll show you. And so we do, and we proceed to see a weird, there's no shape. This thing had no shape, just a shadow run back and forth between all three windows. Just back and forth. It wasn't there every night. You couldn't really pinpoint when it was gonna happen. It showed up when, like, negative things were happening in the house a lot, I noticed. But we just happened to get lucky that night, I guess, and see it. We would also see in those back windows headlights, and behind their house is nothing but a field. There are no freaking headlights. There's no headlights. No one would be up there with flashlights because it's private property, but we would see those, and my mom specifically would see that right as soon as a relative was about to pass away. And this isn't just the back windows, it's every window in the house, really. Red eyes would be in the windows a lot. And the windows were up high enough to where, at least in the front, you couldn't really just look in and, like, scare people. Like, it was something. And almost everyone that went to my parents' house, including, like, relatives that would come out of town and stay, said they saw those red eyes. And it actually scared a few of my cousins so bad that they woke up my parents, like, just completely shook. So yeah, that weird shadow thing running in my childhood home backyard got me into scary stuff. And my mom still sees it to this day, she said.
Hey everyone. So I have a little Appalachian nurse story time for you. So, back when I was first a nurse, like, I've been a nurse 27 years, so this was back in the early 2000s. I'd been a nurse a couple of years. And I was working in a long-term care facility. And I had a patient who was actively dying. And she didn't have any family members or anything like that. So when the day came, I had to call she was a ward of the state, so I had to call them for notification to let them know. And so I tried to finish everything that I could so I could spend some time with her, because I knew, she was actively dying and I didn't want her to die alone. So I got all my tasks done so that I could go and spend a little time with her, sit with her, hold her hand, pray with her, all the things to make her feel a little more comfortable and make sure that she wasn't in any pain as well. And so, she was doing the things that you do when you pass away. There's a certain look you get, their breathing patterns, your vitals change. There's a tons. I mean, I've worked hospice for years, but this was like in the beginning. So she had fallen asleep. So I thought this is a perfect time to call her a priest because she was Catholic. So I went out and I called the priest. Now, mind you, we were in the middle of a wicked snow and ice storm. And, like all of us that worked the shift that I was on, we were evening shift, we were froze over in the midnight shift. And that went, literally every nurse, every aide, even kitchen staff, like, we were stuck. Nobody was coming or going. So I get a hold of the priest and he's like, yeah, we'll be there, but I might be a little bit late. So, and I said, I don't think she has a lot of time left. And he said, well, I'm still going to come. So I said, great. So I go back in the room and she had kind of opened her eyes. Now, when someone passes or when they're getting close to passing, a lot of times they will get a stare. And when they have this stare, it's like anything going on over here or anywhere else, it doesn't matter, because they are laser focused into whatever they're seeing. And it's not what you're seeing. So, it's not normal for them to acknowledge you. You know, that's not something that usually happens when you get to that point. So her breathing had kind of changed, so I knew she really didn't have a lot of time left. And I said, I was holding her hand, and I said, your priest, he's on his way. I called your priest. She was a very sweet lady. And then, the whole time I had been taking care of her, she was a very devout Catholic. And, but the one problem that she did have is she was nonverbal. So, non-speaking, nonverbal. Her dementia was so advanced that she just was unable to communicate with anybody. But she would be reading, she would read her Bible and those types of things. And she would always attend any services that they had at this place. And so I said, don't worry, he's coming. I'm holding her hand. And I said, it won't be long that he'll be here. I said, but, there was a pretty bad snowstorm outside. So, but he is on his way. And I noticed the temperature of the room was cold. So I had walked over to the window to make sure that it wasn't open, because the wind was howling that night. And, so I come back over to her bedside and, I was still holding her hand, and I said, if you're in any pain, just squeeze my hand, do whatever you have to do. And her eyes froze. And then she looked over like this, and then the head turned, and she was staring me in the eyes, which is unusual, because usually, once they're not with you anymore. And the one thing that got me was the pupils of her eyes. Now, the whites of her eyes were still the same, the iris. She had ice blue eyes, and they were beautiful. And, but what got me were the pupils. When she was looking at me, her pupils were slit like a cat's eyes. I was like, so I was trying to maintain professionalism, hold my composure, not freak out. Inside I'm going, But, and my facial expressions tend to get quite animated. So, and I know this. So when she was looking at me, I was holding a very calm face. I'm like, it's okay. Your priest is coming. He'll be here in just a little bit. And, those slit eyes. So she finally, after a little bit, she just kind of turned away from me and went back to staring at what she was staring at. And right before he got there, she had taken her last breath. And he still came in and did what he had to do. But I had told him what I had seen, because I was like, something's a little different. I had seen her eyes a gazillion times because I was her nurse, and I had to do neuro checks on her, especially if, they had a fall, we had to do neuro checks. They were always round. They were never slit, ever. And so I kept thinking to myself, I'm sure there's probably a perfectly logical medical explanation for this, totally perfectly normal. I'm sure. Has to be, right? So I told the priest about what I had seen, and it didn't even faze him. And I thought, somebody tells you something crazy like that, and he was just like, yeah, it was a demon. I was like, a what? I'm sorry, a what? He said, no big deal. I'm not Catholic. And so I'm like, is this a thing? Is this a thing? This is normal? And he's like, yeah, you just call us. I said, No, sir. No, sir. I have a strict no demon policy. So that was how that went. And the crazy part is that, typically when you pass away, your eyes, they're pinpoint and then they dilate. And hers didn't. They stayed in that position, the slit eye position, like a cat's eye is what it reminded me of, or like a snake, like slits in her eyes. And I don't know what happened, what made that happen, but that was the first unusual thing I had ever seen. And it definitely took me back, but I did not move. I did not budge. I maintained my professionalism. I did my job. I did everything that I was supposed to do. And I stayed with her the entire time, and I did not leave her. Not even when she was looking at me with those eyes doing the thing that they were doing. But that is one of many times that very unusual things I have seen happen. So just wanted to share that.
Growing up, I did not know that there were true scary things that were happening in the Appalachian Mountains. I was born near the city, and I'm all about the city life. So when I heard about these stories, I was fascinated. Then I thought to myself, I went camping a couple years ago for my birthday weekend, and I wonder if that's anywhere near the Appalachian Mountains. So I went to Google, and guess what? I was camping in the Appalachian Mountains. And trust me, it is true what they say about those mountains. Now, I only stayed there for 2 nights, and both nights I experienced something strange. So the first night we set up our tents, and then we set our campfire. And we all sat around the campfire. Except where I was sitting was directly across from the woods. So literally there's someone sitting right across from me, and 3-4 feet behind them is the woods, and I am staring directly at it. So as everyone's having a good time talking, telling stories, all of a sudden I see a pair of eyes staring back at me. Now, these pairs of eyes were not normal eyes. These eyes reflected light, kind of like nocturnal animals. And I just kept staring at it, just staring at the eyes. We were having a staring contest. And I was just waiting for it to just walk away, just like any animal that would just stare at you and then they would just go on their way. But no. Not these pairs of eyes. They just kept staring at us. Until, I'm not sure if it was me or someone else, but we pointed out that there were pairs of eyes staring at us. And we all turned around and realized. Now, one of us flashed light to the eyes, and it did went away. And everyone just went back to normal. Everyone was just saying, oh, it's just an animal. So they just went back to talking, telling stories, but not me. Something just did not feel right. So I just kept looking, and guess what? It came back. Now, I didn't want to scare myself, so I convinced myself that it was just an animal, and I just kept just enjoying time with my family. But those pairs of eyes were watching us the entire night. And I always wonder to this day, was it an animal or was it something strange?
I live in the Appalachian Mountains. Our dogs used to run off all the time. One day, me and my younger cousin got off of the bus and we noticed that the dogs were nowhere to be found. We lived surrounded completely by forest. Them not being there wasn't unusual, so we decided just to go off and look for them in the woods, which is something we did pretty often, so we weren't scared. Me and my cousin started walking through the woods, calling for the dogs, and I had the stupid idea to start whistling. We heard what sounded like our dog barking coming from deeper in the woods, so we started walking towards the sound. But the deeper we were walking in the woods towards the sound, started getting this really bad feeling in my gut that we needed to turn around. I told my cousin how I was feeling, and he told me that he was sure that that was our dogs barking. We decided to keep walking, and then we heard a whistle coming from the direction that the dog's barking was coming from. When I was whistling, I wasn't doing like a normal whistle. I was doing this weird whistle, and this sounded just like the weird whistle I had just done. Almost like whatever it was copying me. We stopped walking and we heard more barking, and I just knew that it wasn't our dogs barking. Like, it did sound similar, but it just wasn't the same. That's when my little cousin looked at me scared, like he was about to say something, and I told him just ignore it. I grabbed his hand and we started to calmly walk back home. I didn't say anything, but the entire time we were walking, it sounded like something was walking back behind us. We kept making the walk back home. It took us another 15 minutes to make it. When we finally did make it back home, we were trying to convince ourselves that it had actually just been our dogs. About 5 minutes later, our older cousin showed up and we told her what had happened, and she said that we still needed to go find the dogs. So she grabbed her dog who can track their scents, and we headed back into the woods. We started calling their names like we had done before, and I started to whistle. My older cousin stopped me and pointed at her dog, who was sitting on the ground growling, looking up at the top of the trees. I grabbed my younger cousin and said we should leave. My older cousin told us no, the dogs could be hurt, so we needed to keep looking for them. After a little convincing, we started walking deeper, but not in the direction that the dog was growling at, just in the opposite direction. We were walking maybe for 5 or 6 more minutes when we heard what sounded like my mom calling for us, saying she had found the dogs. My mom was in Texas at the time, and she wouldn't be home for 2 more days. We decided to leave. We went the long way, so we weren't walking towards where the voice came from. When we got home, my younger cousin was crying, asking what if the dogs were hurt, because we just still hadn't found the dogs. Right about that time, our neighbor came walking up the driveway with our dogs. He said they'd been in his house the entire time. He had found them and brought them into his house because the game warden was there. He didn't want them to be taken, so he waited until the game warden left, and then he brought them home to us. The next day, my uncle was asking us about it. When we told him what happened, he looked so scared and said that the game warden was there because one of the neighbors had called in and reported seeing a weird, demented, sick-looking, huge black dog in the forest by our house. They also reported hearing the creepy whistling and barks.
All right, so I know we've all seen them videos on TikTok about the Appalachian Mountains and the Appalachia trails and what be in them Appalachia trails as far as I don't know, skinwalkers, things making noises, people screaming for help and they really ain't people and that. Well, I got my own little story. So me and a group of friends, we actually went to Loon Mountain, which is in New Hampshire. And come to find out, my friend whose birthday it was actually informed all of us that, that whole area is part of the Appalachian Trail, right? Keep that in mind. So we were going there for the weekend for my friend's birthday to go ski. Now, it's my first time skiing. I had the time of my life, but I busted my thumb and I tore a ligament, but that's another story for another TikTok. Anywho, we had a great time. We were there from Friday night up until Monday morning. And like I said, keep in mind the whole Appalachian information that my friend dropped on us. So that's kind of in the very back of my mind. And I'm all about that shit. I'm all about the supernatural and the unknown. I'm all about that. So check it. Few of the nights, it was super cold, super windy, right? And obviously, we know the wind be sounding woo, and be making noises and shit. It's that's mad loud. We know what wind sounds like, even at its loudest, even at its most, whistling or whatever. But y'all ever heard about what they say about if you hear someone whistling up in them Appalachian trails? And what makes this even crazier is, I'm not even lying. It was Sunday night going into Monday morning, I want to say. I'm not even lying, God, strike me down. I roll over, and I hear the clearest whistle I think I've ever heard. The clearest! I cannot stress this enough. There wasn't no whoo, that sounded outside my window, whistling. My eyes bolted the open real big. And I swear to God, the first thought in my mind was, if you hear someone whistling, no, you didn't. So I rolled over and I minded my business. But can I tell you how tempted I was to peel back them blinds and see? But I'm no, this is how scary movies start. This is how they start. Don't do that. And I didn't. And I rolled over and I went to my bed.
People in Barber County still argue about which holler it was, but nobody argues what was found. So for years, there was a lake locals called the Winter Sink. That's literally what it was called. It wasn't on the maps, just a wide bowl of water tucked into timberland, fed by springs and runoff. And every winter, without fail, the water would drop. It wouldn't freeze. it would drain. And by January, you could walk the basin on cracked mud and dead leaves, and come spring, the lake always returned. And folks treated it like a curiosity. Kids explored the bottom looking for arrowheads. Hunters crossed it as a shortcut. Old-timers warned not to linger, but they warned about everything, so that wasn't new. Then one winter, the water didn't just drop. It emptied. By mid-January, the basin lay bare, deeper than anyone had ever seen. And this time, what surfaced wasn't driftwood or rocks, it was bone. Now at first, a man thought he'd found a deer carcass. Then another skull appeared. Then another. Whole rib cages, half sunk in the mud, long bones laid out like someone had tried to line them up and given up. Not one or two, it was hundreds. Too many to be accidental. Too mixed to be a single tragedy. Old bones, newer ones, some clean and white. Others darkened and brittle. No coffins, no markers. No pattern anyone can make sense of. The county came quietly. No press, no public announcements. Trucks hauled dirt in at night. Deputies blocked logging roads for maintenance. Whatever investigation happened, it never made it to a courtroom or a headline, and by spring, the lake was gone. Not drained temporarily, it was erased. They filled the basin with earth and stone until it was solid, planted trees thick enough to choke the memory out of it. Within a few years, it looked like any other patch of West Virginia forest. No sign a lake had ever even been there. No one ever said where the bones came from. Some say it was an old burial ground, washed loose by underground water. Others say it was a dumping place used for generations because the lake conveniently hid and returned bodies on a schedule no one questioned. And the most unsettling theory comes from the old survey notes that mention sinkholes beneath the basin, voids that connected to caves no one ever mapped. Places where things fall and don't come back. And if you hike long enough in Barber County, you might come across a stretch of trees growing too evenly, roots twisted like they don't trust the ground. And if the wind moves through them just right, it sounds like water draining. And if you stand there in the winter, when everything goes quiet, you might understand why no one wants to say exactly where the lake used to be. Some things are easier to bury twice.
When I first started looking into all these stories in the Appalachia, I started to notice that a lot of them take place near cave systems or mines. And it made me wonder if they have some sort of connection to the strange things that happen there. Perhaps when they started drilling or opening up these mines, they released something from underground. And these things run up and down the Appalachian Mountains. Perhaps these are some type of portal. Now, there was this man named Jeff. Jeff said that he had a friend who worked for Mammoth Cave as a park ranger. And so one day they were having a conversation, and he was telling them that there was all this weird stuff that was happening at the park. And apparently there had been a couple animal attacks, and they were really strange. They couldn't figure out what had done it. They said they thought maybe a bear or a mountain lion, but it was unlike anything they had seen before. So Jeff thought for himself, I should go and investigate this. So he heads out to the Mammoth Cave National Park. And he finds this one trail where his friend, the park ranger, told him to go. So as he gets there and he parks his vehicle, he gets out, he gets his backpack on, and he's got his sleeping bag rolled up, right behind him. As he's getting ready to go on the trail, a park ranger stops him and is like, "Hey, you're not planning on camping out tonight, are you?" And he said, "Well, no, I just kind of bring it with me. If, something happens and I have to stay in the woods, then, I'm ready." And the park ranger said to him, I would have, one, it's illegal, and two, I would highly advise against it. You don't stay out there tonight. Like, something is going on. Like, I don't think it's a good idea. And he's like, well, I'm just probably going to go for a day hike and then come back and leave. And he said this park ranger was very insistent that he didn't stay the night. So he gets on this trail and he starts hiking. Well, he said at first, there was all this wildlife and he could hear all these different sounds. But at one point in time, it just went completely quiet. He said he didn't hear a bird. He didn't hear the scurrying of any animals. It was just completely quiet. And he thought, that's like really, really odd. So he continued hiking. And it started to get dark. Well, he started to think to himself, do I head back in the darkness or do I camp somewhere? So he decided he was going to camp out there in the woods. He finds this clearing next to the trail. He builds a fire and he rolls out a sleeping bag. Said he laid down and he just sat there. And he was so amazed by just how quiet it was. He said you could hear a pin drop. But then all of a sudden, he hears this crashing sound, like something's coming through the woods, directly at him. And then he started to hear a woman screaming, saying, help, help me, help. And he said that's when this woman came running out of brush. She was all muddy, bruised, and tattered up, like something, had been attacking her. And she says, look, you got to help me. Like, it's coming, it's coming. And he said that's when he sees the shadow move behind her. And out from the darkness into the light of the fire, he could see this 7-foot tall, hairy man-like creature with very long arms, very long legs, and the face of a wolf. And he said this thing just grabbed this woman and pulled her into the woods. She's screaming and yelling. And he said, it just happened so fast, like he didn't know what to do. So he just sat there. And he said after about 10 or 15 minutes, it went quiet. And it was eerily quiet. So that's when he could see this thing, but he could just see its eyes. And it was staring at him from the wood line, just looking at him. And he said all night long, this thing hovered outside of his campsite, trying to lure him out. Morning comes, this thing is left. And he starts to wonder, should I leave? Should I actually go back out into the woods or just stay here at my campsite? At around noon, he finally decides, okay, I'm gonna make a run for it. So he starts running and he's screaming the whole time, like, help me, help me. He eventually makes it back to the parking lot. And as he gets there, there are ambulances, there are cop cars, and all these park rangers. And so he goes up to one of the park rangers and he's like, hey, what's going on? And he said the park ranger said to him that there had been an animal attack. It was some woman. And he tried to tell him, like, no, it wasn't an animal. Like, it was something else. I seen it. I seen what happened. And they told him he needed to leave, like he was being crazy. And they never believed him. But he knew in his mind what he had seen. And he said now every time he goes past like a forest or something, he feels very sick to his stomach.
Have you ever heard of death doors in the Appalachian Mountains? That was a real part of old Appalachian folklore. A death door is a door you don't go in or out unless you're carrying a coffin. Appalachians would have their funerals at home after they set up with the dead for usually about 3 days. The belief was that once the door was used for the dead, it shouldn't be used again for the living, for ordinary comings and goings. Sometimes death doors would be bolted up or locked when they weren't in use for a funeral. Appalachians had a lot of superstitions around doors and windows. And you'll find that in other cultures as well. Any opening to the home, doors, windows, chimneys, were considered spirit pathways, thresholds between worlds. There were a lot of Germans that settled in Appalachia, and it was common for them to put 2 doors on the front of their house. And some people would have a daily use door and a formal door. But a lot of people will dismiss the death doors and say that those are the only explanations. But the thing is, a lot of death doors were originally built for practical purposes. But when cultures blended together with their folklore, a lot of those doors built for practical reasons became death doors, especially for people who clung to the old folk ways. And a death door can be a side door or a back door too. It doesn't just have to be a second front door. Not every family followed this belief, but it was a real widespread belief that is culturally meaningful. It's in many Appalachian families' oral history. This is something I commonly heard myself from older generations. In the Appalachian Mountains, death doors reflect a deeply rooted belief. The death required a separate, controlled exit, both to honor the dead and protect the living, blending practical architecture with centuries-old spiritual beliefs.
Look, dude, she couldn't find her way over there, so now she's over here. She's back in here trying to find her way into my property. Do you see her? Look at that face. Oh my God. It's right there staring at me.
Yo. Whoa. Where you go? Whoa. Run. Go. What the? Inside. Close it.
I did. If you ever felt the chill of something watching you in the woods, you're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe and share your own encounter in the comments below. The mountains are watching. Are you? As always, stay safe, stay aware, and question everything.